why would your wife make the best first lady? I'll ask these 4 candidates. Stay with us. I'm Blitzer. We're here in Jacksonville for CNN's Florida Republican presidential debate. Many of you are watching online, commenting on Twitter, Facebook, at CNN.com. We have many more questions for the candidates, including one that hits close to home. Stand by to find out why each man on this stage thinks his wife would be the best first lady. I want to get right back to the rest of the debate, but first, on a lighter subject, I want to ask each of these gentlemen why they think their wife would make a great first lady. Congressman Paul.
Well, she's been my wife for 54 years, and we're going to have an anniversary on February 1st.
Congratulations.
So, she's the mother of 5 of our children, and she's a grandmother of 18 grandchildren, does an excellent job, and she's also the author of a very famous cookbook, the Ron Paul Cookbook. So,
Governor?
I got to take a little more time, a little more seriousness. Nothing wrong with what you said. I'm sorry. My wife is also a mom, and as I pointed out early on, but in some respects, she is a real champion and a fighter. She was diagnosed in 1998 with multiple sclerosis, and more recently with breast cancer. She has battled both successfully, and as First Lady, she will be able to reach out to people who are also struggling and suffering, and will be someone who shows compassion and care. And she's also had a passion all of her adult life on helping people in troubled situations, young women in particular, understand the importance of getting married before they have babies and encouraging people to create families to raise kids in.
I say, first of all, having gotten to know them, I think all 3 of the wives represented here would be terrific first ladies. Calista and I have gotten to know all 3 of them. We think they'd be fabulous people. So I'd rather just talk about why I like Calista and why I'd like her to be first lady, but she's not necessarily in any way better. These are wonderful people, and they would be wonderful first ladies. But Calista brings a couple things. One is a tremendous artistic focus. She's done a video and music education, why it really matters. She's a pianist by background, plays the French horn in the community band, sings in the choir of the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. She really cares about the arts and would bring a really strong feeling for music education and for art and why it matters to people as part of their education. She's also very patriotic about American exceptionalism. She's had a best-selling New York Times book, a children's book, and has really reached out to young people to get them to understand America. And she's helped produce and host 7 movies now, so she'd bring an entire, I think, artistic flavor. And I obviously would be thrilled to be able to hang out with her at the White House, so it'd be great.
I suspect you would be. Unfortunately, Senator Santorum, your wife is not here tonight.
Yeah, she's not. She's doing what she does incredibly well, which is to be a mother to our 7 children, and she's my hero. She's someone who has been, well-educated. She was a neonatal intensive care nurse for 9 years, one of the most advanced nurseries in the country. She went on to because she saw all these ethical challenges there, so she went on and got a law degree so she could deal with those in the legal world. And then when she got married, she gave that up. She walked away and walked into something that she felt called to do, which is to be a mom and to be a wife. And we've had 8 children. We were blessed to be raising 7. We've been through a lot together, losing a child, having a child with a disability that we have now, our little Bella. And the amount of love for these special kids is just palpable in her. She wrote a book about our son that we lost called Letters to Gabriel, about that ordeal that we went through. That book, that little book, has saved countless. We know of at least hundreds of lives that were saved because people read that book and realized that the child that we're carrying had the dignity to be loved and nurtured irrespective of what malady may befallen that baby in the womb. And so many children were born and are alive today because of that book. She's also written a book on manners. That's something that we have 7 children, so we know that kids are not born good. And so manners is very important in our house, and she wrote a storybook because there were all sorts of how-to books on manners, but there was no storybook teaching manners through, well, how Christ taught us, through stories. And that's what she did, and that book is hopefully somewhat civilized some children around this country.
Very nice. All right, let's get back to the debate now. Governor Romney, you criticized Speaker Gingrich for not being as close to Ronald Reagan as he says he was. When you ran for the Senate, you said you were, quote, you weren't trying to return to Reagan-Bush. So the question is, do you think you can claim the Reagan mantle more than Speaker Gingrich?
Oh, of course not. No, I was, at the time Ronald Reagan was president, I was just getting started. I went through school, came out of school, got my first job, worked my way up in a consulting company, and then after a while I started a business of my own. I was looking at politics from afar and learning as time went on. I didn't get involved in politics early in my life. I instead spent my time building a business. And then later, as my business had been successful and we'd been involved in some turnaround situations, some businesses in trouble that we were able to help. Not all worked out as we'd hoped, but a number did. I got asked to go off and help get the Salt Lake City Olympics in 2002 on track. And put aside my business and went to Utah, and was perhaps the greatest professional experience of my life, going there and spending 3 years helping getting those games on track. I happen to believe the Olympics is one of the great showcases of the human spirit that exists in the media world, and it was very successful. And then after that, I was asked by some friends to come back and run for governor, did that. And that's when I became terribly politically involved. And in that involvement, I learned a lot of lessons. Being governor taught me a lot of things. I became more conservative, by the way, as I was governor, and found the importance of lowering taxes, making it easier for businesses to grow, the importance of driving schools to be the best in the country. Those are the things I did, and so I'm not suggesting. The Speaker was a congressman at the time Ronald Reagan was president, so he of course was closer to the Ronald Reagan era than I.
Mr. Speaker, you've heard the criticism lately that you weren't necessarily as close to the president as you suggest.
Well, it's increasingly interesting to watch the Romney attack machine coordinate things. And all of a sudden today, there are like 4 different articles by 4 different people that randomly show up. The fact is, I'm thrilled that Michael Reagan has endorsed me and will be campaigning with me here in Florida. I remember very fondly in 1995 when we were at the Goldwater Institute, and Nancy Reagan said, you know, Barry gave Ronnie the torch, and now Ronnie's passing the torch to Newt and his team in Congress. So I think it's reasonable to say, and I think the governor said it fairly, I am vastly closer to Reagan. In that period, the governor was an independent business person. In '92, he was donating to Democrats for Congress and voted for Paul Tsongas in the Democratic primary. In '94, running against Teddy Kennedy, he said flatly, I don't want to go back to the Reagan-Bush era. I was an independent. So there's a pretty wide gap. Now, he's more mature. He's more conservative. I accept that. I think it's a good thing. But those of us who were in the trenches fighting in the 80s, it would be nice to be recognized for what we actually did and not to have orchestrated attacks that try to distort the history of that period.
Governor Romney, you can respond.
Just a short clarification. I've never voted for a Democrat when there was a Republican on the ballot. And in my state of Massachusetts, you could register as an independent and go vote in which either primary happens to be very interesting. And any chance I got to vote against Bill Clinton or Ted Kennedy, I took. So I have always voted for a Republican any time there was a Republican on the ballot. With regards to the Speaker's involvement in the Reagan years, he can speak for himself. The Reagan diaries and the other histories that are written at that time could lay that out as well. I think what he said speaks for itself, and I'm proud of the things that I was able to accomplish.
Let's take another question from the audience. Go ahead, please stand up and give us your name.
Hi, my name is Jorge Millares. I live here in Jacksonville, and when I was 3 years old, I was very blessed that my parents brought me here from Cuba. They brought me here so that I could be raised in freedom and in liberty. President Obama has recently announced that he is liberalizing trade and travel policies. What would be your position as president toward the island of Cuba?
Senator Santorum.
I would oppose it. I've been 100% in support of the Cuban people and their right to have a free Cuba, and the United States should stand on the side of the Cuban people against these despots who are not just reigning terror, continuing reign of terror in Cuba, but now have their puppet Chavez in Venezuela, and Noriega, and Morales, and it keeps like a cancer growing. So the idea that a president of the United States would take the heart of the cancer that is in Central and South America and begin to reward behavior that has spread this cancer because of our dilly-dallying and our inattentiveness to the problems in Central and South America. Now we're going to reward the secret police that are as present in Venezuela as they are in Cuba. We're going to reward this type of thuggery, this type of Marxism in our region. We're going to reward a country that is now working with these other countries to harbor and bring in Iran and the terrorists, the jihadists who want to set up missile sites and to set up training camps. And so we're going to reward this behavior by opening up and liberalizing. This is the exact wrong message at the exact wrong time.
Congressman Paul, you said the U.S. should talk to everyone. Imagine you're in the Oval Office. You speak to Raul Castro. What would you say to him?
Well, I'd ask him what he called about, you know. What was the purpose of his call? No, I would ask him, what can we do to improve relations? Because I wouldn't see them as likely to attack us. When I was drafted in October of '62, that was a different world. I mean, there were nuclear weapons in Cuba. That was a different story. But today, not to talk to them and take the call and see what you can work out, helps Castro. It hurts the people, the dissidents, the people who want to overthrow him have always had to be, you know, nationalistic and unified behind the leader. So as well-intended as these sanctions are, they almost inevitably backfire, and they help the dictators and hurt the people. So it's time to change. The Cold War is over. They're not going to invade us, and I just think that a better relationship and trade relationship, so many people, I think I've noticed already, and since I've been talking about this issue the last 4 or 5 years, I think the people have changed their mind. The American people are getting much more open, not nearly as frightened. People, I don't think they see a jihadist under the bed every night, and we have to worry about that. I think there's I worry about overreaction and overconcern and lack of ability to talk to them when they call you.
I want both of you to weigh in. Governor Romney first.
Two major flaws with President Obama's foreign policy as it relates to Latin America.
What about Ron Paul's policy?
Well, I'm talking about President Obama right now. We can get back to Ron Paul in a moment. First of all, I think the president has largely ignored Latin America, Cuba in particular, Venezuela, and other nations. I think we have to change that dramatically. I think we have to have economic initiatives to build trade throughout Latin America, particularly with Colombia and Panama, now part of free trade agreements. I want more of that throughout Latin America. But that's first flaw, ignoring Latin America. And number two is reaching out with accommodations to some of the world's worst actors, whether it was Putin in Russia giving him what he wanted, or Castro saying we're going to let you have remittances coming from the U.S. to fund your future, or relaxed trade restrictions. Throughout the world, with Ahmadinejad opening an open hand, tyrants look for weakness to take advantage. That's the wrong course. The right course for Cuba is to continue to honor Helms-Burton. And if I'm president of the United States, I will use every resource we have, short of invasion and military action, Congressman Paul, I'll use every resource we can to make sure that when Fidel Castro finally leaves this planet, that we are able to help the people of Cuba enjoy freedom. They want it. It's a God-given right, and it is our responsibility to help share the gift of freedom with the people throughout the world that are seeking it.
Are you open to it, Mr. Speaker? Are you open to improving relations with Cuba?
Well, let me start with where the governor correctly pointed out. I was very proud as Speaker to be able to make sure that the Helms-Burton Act passed, and I'm delighted that Congressman Dan Burton is here tonight and is campaigning with me, because it was a very important step towards isolating the Castro regime. I think it's amazing that Barack Obama is worried about an Arab Spring. He's worried about Tunisia. He's worried about Libya. He's worried about Egypt. He's worried about Syria. And he cannot bring himself to look south and imagine a Cuba